Here's what it is about. HeartBreatHero, or #HeartBreatHero, is a campaign between the British Heart Foundation and AWS to raise awareness of cardiovascular disease. HeartBreatHero was born on January 2018 at the British Heart Foundation and AWS Hackathon in London. Think about how many people are affected in your circle.
Thanks, Alexa. So, we chose to look at the raising awareness of cardiovascular disease. It's an impact an issue that impacts a lot of people in the UK today, as we'll demonstrate as we go through the presentation. So, helps if I turn it on. There we go. So, we went through a number of data sources, and the first we've looked at is the Office of National Statistics. I need to stay close to the mic. And the Office of National Statistics tell us that at the end of 2017, there are roughly 66 million people living in the UK. More interestingly, or depending on your viewpoint, according to the British Heart Foundation, in the UK at the end of 2017, there were just over 7 million people who had cardiovascular disease. More worryingly, there were over 152,000 deaths in the UK in 2017 related to heart disease. And more worryingly still, 25% of all deaths in the UK can be attributed to CVD. So this is a huge impact. Or to put it into context, to make you even more worried if you're not worried enough already, every 8 minutes in the UK, somebody dies of CVD. This is a huge impact to the UK as a whole. I want to throw some numbers at you. I want a bit of audience participation here. So 9,000 million, or if there's any Americans in the room, that's 9 billion. I want to know, does anyone in the room want to hazard a guess at what 9 billion actually relates to? Anyone? Silence, I've scared you all. Right, 9 billion is what the British Heart Foundation estimates is the cost to the UK economy every year through cardiovascular disease. This is a really, really big number. We're talking about the cost to our economy, everyone's strapped for money, we're in massive deficit. 9 billion is being caused by this one issue. There's another number for you, 3 million. So anyone want to hazard a guess at what 3 million represents?
The cost of implementing a solution.
Sorry, it's not a Microsoft solution, this is a 3 million is the number of people in the UK today who are estimated to have CVD and don't actually know they've got it. That's 40% of all people who've got cardiovascular disease do not know they've got it. Statistically, that is 1 in every 20 people. Or more importantly, what it means to you in the room, everybody in this room knows somebody who has got cardiovascular disease but doesn't know they have it. That's the important bit. They don't know they've got cardiovascular disease, and everybody in this room knows somebody in that position. I'm assuming, of course, that you all know at least 20 people. And actually, I did a quick count earlier on, there's around 80 people in this room today. So I can safely say that everybody in this room knows at least 20 people because there's 80 people in the room. But here's a sobering thought. That means there's 4 people in this room today who have cardiovascular disease and don't know they've got it. There's something to think about. So how do we get all this data? There's lots of data sources there. We love data at Amazon, so we've got lots of data sources. I've just given you a couple of examples of the data from the Office of National Statistics, from the British Heart Foundation, which has hopefully made real to you the size of the problem that we're trying to address and the size of the value that we can achieve, not just commercially, but also to families, to lives. You only got to speak to JJ. Those of you who are here, I hope you all were when we had our first one. One of the most moving stories I've ever heard is how JJ went through his life when he suddenly discovered he had CVD and what it meant to him. But from my point of view, it's actually what about his family? It's not just what it did to JJ, but what it did to his extended family as well. These are massive impacts on people. But interestingly, as part of the solution, we can look at mining data sources. One of the things that we talked about when we were doing our workshopping is NICE is the organisation, or NICE, however it's pronounced. They are the organisation that are responsible for shipping drugs around the UK. Now, we also know through our NHS data and through British Heart Foundation data where occurrences of heart disease are occurring. So you can marry up where drugs are being shipped and where heart disease is occurring, and if you've got an area of the country that's not having any drugs shipped to it, it's a very safe bet that there's a high incidence of undetected CVD in that area. And so we can focus efforts in those areas. This is how we can use data going forward, with a solution we'll come on to in a minute.
Thanks, Mike, for establishing the data bit. And as Mike quite rightly said, we're a data-driven company. There are a lot of technologists in the room. So when we started the thought process, and we were in the room with Helen and kind of started sharing ideas, we quickly got excited about the technical aspects and the shiny things and how we could consolidate those data sources and build something great. But then we thought, well, we thought about wearables as well, like in the Arcus presentation. But we thought we would probably only address a small group with this. People who are actually open to technology, people who actually who wants to get that information and wants to get that awareness. But then we actually thought about the wider group and thought about the 40%. It's not just one profile, right? So there are probably 4 different profiles at least. And so the 4 profiles we identified is the no news is good news group. Right? Well, that's the ignorance is bliss group. So we actually don't want to know anything about our health. So they're probably a bit harder to approach, to any initiatives. So how can we actually get to them? That's probably a tricky one. Then there's the lacking awareness group. So, JJ, you probably fall into that group. You're healthy, you're working out, and you're just not aware that you're part of the risk group. And you're potentially very open to any programs if you know that something's happening. The overwhelmed group, so that could be your commuter, your traveler who's like spending between meetings and airports, or it's just has other priorities in life but just not health. Potentially, after an incident, they tend to change their behavior as well. And then there's the Dr. Google group. That's where I find myself in. And GPs love it when you come with your kind of pre-assessed analysis and say, this is what I found out about myself. So they're probably, in generally open for it and are quite proactive in finding those initiatives. So in general, we found this is a social issue. It's not something we can, even though we have the data sources, we can't just address that with technology. So we need to do that kind of on a more social and behavioral level and address people's fears and people's behaviors. And it's absolutely worth doing it. And Shirley will actually explain how. Why? Yeah.
So I'll talk about the benefits a little bit more. So essentially, Mike's gone through the issues, so we know what the impact is, we know what the impact is to the economy and to families. Nabeer's gone through who we're going to be tackling with our solution. And essentially the benefits are pretty simple. We want to improve the health of the general population. So telling people to cut down on things like salt, improve their diet, maybe cut out smoking, is not just going to be good for those 3 million people that actually have CVD, but also the people that are at risk factors, the ones that are going to be getting it in the future. So if we can get into people early, then we can intervene and actually stop them becoming at risk in the first place. We can raise awareness of CVD. We want it to be part of the everyday conversation, so we know what blood pressure numbers mean, we know what all of the risk factors are, and something that we talk about having our blood pressure checked and kind of take away the mystery. 25% of deaths in 2017 is not an insignificant number, so if we can start changing the conversation and understanding what the risks are, I think we can do some real good. And again, we've got releasing pressure and budgets from health services. We all know in this room that the NHS is under massive strain, and if we can actually take that, make a dent in that 9 billion or the 225 million that the Arcus guys talked about earlier, or that £11,000 that it costs the NHS every time someone has a stroke, then we're going to go a good way to doing some good and relieving that pressure. So when we're looking at it, we've got the hard benefit, which is the budgets, then we've got the soft benefit, which is not just saving lives and saving families from devastation, but also changing the story around CVD and having those conversations. And Mike's going to tell us how we're going to do that.
So, hopefully I've given you an idea of the size of the challenge, what we've looked at, what we've considered, and hopefully you've just gleaned from this that we think this is actually a social problem. And whilst technology can go a large way to fixing it, we've seen some great examples already of how we can do that, we think actually what we've got to do is get a groundswell of movement and get people behind it, get people changing the way they live. So the challenge then is, how do we do it? What is the mechanism that we're going to use to get people to start talking about CVD and actually not being embarrassed about it and hiding about it, but start talking about what their health stats are? So we're going to introduce a concept called gamification. I don't know if any of you are aware of what gamification is. Hopefully I'll try and explain it. There's a wealth of information on the internet about gamification. One of the challenges you get when you want to get messaging out, we've talked about GDPR already. I'm surprised it took so long to come up, if I'm going to be honest, because we can't just bombard people with data. They've now got to ask for it as part of our privacy laws. So if we're going to start a campaign to get people actively engaging in talking about CBD and doing something about it, changing their lifestyles, how do we do it? Well, within the British Heart Foundation, there's a group of people called ambassadors. So what we thought is, well, we started a gamification game, and any of you play games. Have you ever been on the tube or the train? I'm sure a lot of you did when you came in this morning. At least half the people on the train, if not more, were just looking at their screen, punching it as hard as they could with their finger, doing stuff. No idea what they're doing, but they're playing games. That's how people spend their time on trains these days. Nobody reads the paper anymore. Well, if they do, it's online, but everything's done online, and people play games all the time. So this is the people we want to get. So we're going to start with our ambassadors. So level 1 of our game, you get a nice cool little trophy. You'll be a Heartbreak ambassador, and these are the people embarking on their journey. And what we want to do is through gaming, get them to engage people within their sphere, expand their sphere of influence, if you like. And once they've engaged 20 people into their sphere of influence, we can now say statistically that they have identified somebody who's got undiagnosed CVD. So you move up the ladder, you get another nice cool trophy to put on your list, and you gain importance. And then you go on. So as you go up the ladder, you then start engaging more people. And what happens with gaming, with these types of things, is people that you've engaged now become people at the bottom and start building up their own areas. So as you increase up, you go up through the rankings, you get better trophies as you move up. And the goal being that as you get to the top, you statistically, we can say that once you breach the top level, you're now a Heartbreak Hero, which is where we get our name from. You have statistically saved a life. So people who've got to this top level have made an impact in the world, in the UK, that is measurable as having saved a life. So this is the goal, and this is the kudos that comes with it. And if you don't want that, you've got these really cool trophies that you can put up on your game or whatever. Now the other thing that we think is really, really good about this, and a lot of people are starting to look at this now with gamification, is not just doing the social rewards and the rewards that comes with gaming, but actually commercial rewards. We can start talking about engaging partners. So Amazon, why don't we, as you go through different levels, once you start to engage a certain number of people, say, we'll give you some vouchers for healthy food from Amazon Foods. Or Sainsbury's, or also another partner of the British Heart Foundation. Why don't they give out vouchers so anyone who gets to a Heartbreak Hero, you've now saved a life. Why don't you have a voucher for some healthy eating? We can tie it back to healthy eating. There are ways of doing this. So we can then engage the community a lot more. One of the things that I found was really interesting, the day that we did our workshop, I was watching the news, and Chris Akabusi was on the news. And he was actually there to read the papers on the day, but as an intro, apparently the British Heart Foundation are accredited with saving his life. He made this statement on national news, and he said, I was here a couple of months ago and you were talking about undiagnosed CVD, so I had a test, and I've got undiagnosed CVD. And he said on that morning, he accredited the British Heart Foundation for saving his life. So when we're talking about getting ambassadors to do this, well, there's a name I want to go and knock on his door and say, why won't you get involved in this campaign to raise the awareness of the dangers of undiagnosed CVD? So why do we think this will work? It's a cool idea. So why do we think it'll work? So the laughter in the room, for those of you who aren't from Amazon, this is our phone tool icons. And I'll let you try and work out who it is. The number at the top, I can't read that one. 3,964 phone tool icons this person's got. So these are our phone tool icons. There's a bit of a craze within Amazon. We've all got to have them. But this is actually gamification in work. One of JJ's things that he said to try and get people engaged in this program, he said, and I quote, and you'll get a really cool phone tool icon. It's not the only reason we do it. But we all make a big deal about our phone tool icons. But what's it actually doing? It's getting us involved in campaigns. It's getting us doing training. It's getting us going to events and things. Every time we do something that's noteworthy, that is of a benefit to Amazon, we get a phone tool icon. And we make a big deal about it. This, by the way, if you're wondering, this is Jeff Bezos's page. Just in case, that's how many he had on Monday. He's probably got more by now.
You'll have a heart hacker one at the end of this.
We'll have one for that, yeah. So, this is Waze. I don't know if any of you ever use Waze. Waze is an open source satellite navigation tool. It's community source. It's brilliant. I used it for a while. And it's got some really cool things on it. So you can see traffic jams. But if you've ever been stuck in a traffic jam and you're using Waze, you can chat to people who are in the traffic jam. So someone at the front will tell you what's causing it and how long they've been there, so you get some information. We all love information. Waze is brilliant at doing that sort of thing. One of the other things that Waze, I've removed Waze, by the way, I'll come back to why in a minute. But one of the other things about Waze, I don't know if you can spot here, this is actually an Easter egg. And there's a few Easter eggs scattered around on the map there. When you're on Waze, if you chat to people, you gain points. If you gain points, you get a really cool, crown. So if you divert your route and you go out of your way, you deliberately inconvenience yourself, you get points. That's gamification. I am deliberately making it more difficult to get home so I can get cool points. I actually took it off, by the way, because of data concerns, what they're managing data. So that is something we need to concern ourselves with if we're doing any gamification. This is also another Amazon thing. This is Google App. So this is a gamification that we've done inside Amazon to encourage people to engage in social media. And this is my influence map from last year. And according to this, I reached 375,000 people last year with the social media interaction that I did with Amazon through Google App. And I've also got some really cool phone tool icons as well as a result of doing that. So I just want to leave you with this. Sorry, I forgot I added this morning. Market research on the value of gamification. $2 billion was spent in 2017 on gamification. By 2023, it's going to be $20 billion. This is a real impact on industry today. People are using it to get people to do things they wouldn't otherwise do. I'm going to leave you with this next one to just give you a flavour for just how crazy gamification can be. Now, this can be treated as a really sad indictment of society today, but if you look at these people, they're all running around, they're not really looking where they're going, they're looking at their phones. There's all sorts of demographics here. You've got people walking their dogs, you've got old people, you've got young people, you've got families. And what they're doing, if you haven't worked out what this is yet, they're running around, they're trying to get electronic pets. This is Pokemon Go. And what's going on at this particular event is, apparently, a legendary appeared, a Pokemon legendary. Now, don't try and get me to explain what a Pokemon legendary is. My kids have tried. I haven't got a clue, I just don't get it. But apparently, lots of people do. A legendary appeared in this park, it went viral on social media, and this is what happened, as people ran around with their phones trying to catch a legendary. The impact it made on me personally, getting my kids to walk my dogs used to be a nigh impossible task, and if I ever did get them out the door, they'd be back in a minute. When this game came out, instead of me having to pester my kids to walk the dogs, they were coming to me, "Can we walk the dogs please?" And when they were gone for an hour, because they were running all over the neighbourhood catching Pokemons. Dogs loved it. They'd never seen so much of our local neighbourhood. So this is why we believe gamification is a great way to bring about social change, to get people openly talking about CBD and make a dent on all the numbers that you've seen. So what's next? Well, once we've won, we will engage the gaming team. We've already actually had conversations with the Amazon gaming team about this, but they're swamped. But we engage the gaming teams, we need to do the proper social research, work out the thing of the minute that's going to bring about the social change, and actively promote this. But as the stats say, this has a real potential to have a big impact on people's lives. And if nothing else, give them something to do on the train in on the way to work. Questions?